Welcome to Just Relationships, the show that offers you concrete ways to make your relationships better. Whether it's your boss, your spouse, your children, or your friends, the quality of your relationships in life directly affects how you feel about yourself and the success you achieve. Your host, Dr. Duffy Spencer, a psychotherapist, telecoach, author, and seminar leader, will interview top experts to help you learn to manage this essential part of your life. And now, here's your host, Dr. Duffy Spencer.
Greetings to you. I know you care for people. You certainly wouldn't be listening to Just Relationships if you don't. And sometimes the people we love and care for can get sick. They can get old. And we may find ourselves in a situation of being a caregiver. And we may have a hard time. It may feel burdensome. It may feel isolating. Very, very strenuous. So I'm very happy to introduce to you my guest, Robert Sharpe, who is the author of and the editor of the book, The Heart and Soul of Caring. The Heart and Soul of Caring. And how you can actually, as a caregiver, not only be challenged, but also have joy. So, welcome, Robert. Thank you for coming on Just Relationships.
Hello, Dr. Duffy. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
It's a real pleasure.
Oh, now tell us what inspired you to write this book, Robert.
Well, it was actually the seed of the book. The inspiration for it came in a waking dream.
Oh.
Yeah, it was one of those, and I'm very much a person who pays attention to my dreams. So I woke up one winter morning, and the whole idea of doing this caregiving book came into my mind, and one of the important parts of it was that for the book to be sure to give honor and attention to the care receiver. So that, a lot of times caregiving books really focus on the job and challenge of being a caregiver, but were it not for the care receiver, that relationship wouldn't exist. So that was it. I woke up and knew that I had to do it, and then proceeded to kind of fine-tune it and get some stories from people I knew.
Give honor and attention to the care receiver. So tell us more about that.
Well, in many cases, particularly when a caregiver is providing care for an elderly person, so maybe family member, a lot of times dementia and Alzheimer's are the root or the source for the need for care. And in with that terrible disease, a lot of times we lose sense of the person, who they lose sense for themselves, but also as a care provider, we sometimes get wrapped up in the day-to-day tasks that we really forget the essence of the person. So,
right.
I really wanted each person who provided a story to give us a glimpse into the essence of the person.
Wonderful. I love how you put that, Robert. That people lose a sense of the person when they're care providers and getting caught up in the tasks at hand. And, I think that we live in a society where people generally lose sense of the person, lose sense of a person as a human being. Many of us can see people as objects in our environment. And Martin Buber called it the instead of the I-thou relationship, where I am sacred and you are sacred, it's the I-it relationship. And then we can even objectify ourselves, and it can be an it relationship.
Yeah, I think in today's society, when we lose or we have limited interaction with people, and many times it's just virtual contact.
Right.
We really lose that intimacy. That's really important.
Right, losing the intimacy. And it's very hard not to in mass society. When you're traveling on the subway or in a crowded place and railroad station in an airport, in walking in a city, it's, we can't kind of invest that much emotion into everybody. So we have these transactional relationships, and that can be really damaging when it's a transactional relationship is applied to intimacy, and it's all about should. You should. You're supposed to quid pro quo. I'll do this for you, or you should do this for me. It's one thing to have a transactional relationship when we are selling something or we're getting gas, buying something. But many people have transactional relationships in intimate settings, and I'm thinking about in institutions where people need help as well as within a family setting.
Yeah, very, very much, and it's that lack of personal contact, spending quality time, with someone, and having the interactions be unconditional, without having to get something in return for spending time with me, that kind of thing.
Right. Conditional. Yes. So you have in your book 11 stories, and each story gives tribute and honor to the care receiver, to the essence of their spirit. And one person's answers can be different from another. Like, can you help your mother find peace near the end of her life? What would you do if in an instant the life with your husband changed forever? How would you juggle having to provide care for your elder brother and sister at the same time? How would you cope if someone in your care could not communicate? These are huge questions.
Yeah, I was really pleasantly surprised by the variety of stories that I received and the circumstances, because each of those questions that you just said are addressed in one of the stories, and to me it just is a good example that, first of all, everyone's story is different. Everyone's circumstances are different. Yet within those stories are some common threads, and some of those things, people wouldn't give thought to prior to the situation happening. So in many cases, it comes out of left field for some people to have to question their beliefs and what would they do in those circumstances.
And I know that dementia is something, and Alzheimer's is something that is particularly challenging when a parent doesn't know their own child, and when that child goes to care for their parent, to see their parent, and there's maybe some general face recognition, but that's about it, not knowing a name. So what do you find that in all these 11 stories there was some sort of common thread of how people can cope, both the caregiver and the care receiver?
Well, as far as common threads, I would say that one of the most important things that came out was that even though the situations were challenging for the caregiver, they all got something back, whether it be, strength that they didn't know that they had, or maybe a gift of empathy that was surprising. So they all got something back, which was, it was just as different as the situations were. So there was that one, and then there was also the having to deal with end of life discussions, situations. A lot of people didn't have those discussions, prior to the need, for making the decisions. And the one thing that virtually everyone said is that, if they realized that they were going to be in that situation, they would have had those discussions, because they would have felt more comfortable in making the decisions that were in alignment with the person who was receiving the care.
Right. And how many people don't take the time and trouble to sit down and say, well, we're getting older, and there's going to be a time when we are going to need care, and this is what we want, and this is what we don't want, and how do you feel about that? Yes, it's a living will, and it's also a conversation, a family meeting. Is that what you mean, Robert?
Yes, very, very much so. And so often we try and put off the discussion of death and dying. The people who are, like the children, don't want to hear about their parents not being there, and the parents in some cases, don't want to burden their children with that idea, So because it's uncomfortable for both sides, the discussion just doesn't happen. But it's important, because the one thing, like one of the stories, one of the important aspects was when it came time to making decisions. It was Maya, for her husband, who had a stroke suddenly, and they weren't prepared, for that kind of situation. And when it came time for her to make medical decisions, she knew what she would want, but she never really knew what her husband would want. So, had they had those discussions ahead of time, it would have made her making the decisions easier, though they would be difficult, but she would at least have felt more comfortable realizing that she was fulfilling what it was that he wanted.
Right. Yes, so many of us tend to think in the short term rather than the long term. So we would put off and avoid discomfort, and later on really, really pay the price. So for someone to know the wishes of their loved one is so important. And, I don't even know the statistics, how many people do write out a living will.
Yeah, I don't know the statistics, but every single person that I spoke with didn't have that. And also, since the book was released, people who have talked to me afterwards all had not had that done. Though it did spur them to think that that is something that they needed to really prioritize where they hadn't before.
Right. What we value, and then going with our priorities, what we most value. So I hope people listening will consider a family meeting, a living will, a regular will, all of that, all of those things about death and dying. What else do you say, Robert, about how we cope with death and dying, especially in our society?
Well, I think we're getting better when it comes to talking about death and dying. Basically with the discussion not being taboo anymore, and I also think since we're the population is aging longer, that it becomes in a way kind of in your face, as an important discussion to have. So
right.
I think we're getting better, but I think we could already do, make better trends, do better with that.
Well, baby boomers have been the generation, the me generation, the most populated generation. Baby boomers have set the trends, set the pace, and now with baby boomers in their older years, we will be able to see changes that are more humanistic, I think. Baby boomers are used to speaking up and getting more of what they want, and the values tend to be rather progressive. So, I think with the graying of America, you can't really ignore it. You can't really ignore dealing with death and dying.
Yeah, exactly. And like you say, there, that boomer generation has wanted to do things on their terms.
Right, exactly.
So, that means even to the grave,
right.
Do it their way.
Right. So, someone in your book, Tom Allen,
Yes.
Wynn, wrote the most beautiful thing, and if it's okay with you, I'd like to read it to our listeners.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Tom so eloquently framed the caretaker role as that of a hero facing a challenging battle that it bears repeating. So the hero, by the way, is the caregiver. And to the care receiver, you are their hero. So what do we know about heroes? Heroes wear bulletproof armor and must react to conditions spontaneously as they occur. Bulletproof, yes, I want to get back to that. A hero must possess a thick skin and a keen sense of compassion, yes. A hero must have the ability to recognize the enemy and not shy away from reinforcements. Understanding a one-person war cannot be won. So get your reinforcements. A hero will recognize that being a martyr will not win the battle. Excellent. A hero must remain healthy, take care of themselves first, or all hope can be lost in the blink of an eye for those you fought so passionately to serve and protect. A hero will understand there is no shame in allowing others on the battlefield. The weary require rest to continue the good fight. Yes, the weary require rest. Beautifully said. A hero takes on the deadly foe because he or she wants to, not because they have to. A hero will never take for granted the one providing the care for the one requiring it. Okay, will never take for granted the one providing the care for the one requiring it. So therefore, the hero, the caregiver, deserves to receive care as well. Like, who cares? I've done seminars in the past. Who cares for the caretaker? And that's the story. Who cares for the caretaker? Who cares for the caregiver? By the way, do you think, Robert, there's a difference between those two words, caretaker and caregiver?
Actually, I had this discussion. I originally didn't think so. But I've come to believe that there is a slight difference. A caretaker, I believe, is someone who it's their job to provide services for the person. So, and in that sense, they're providing care, but also they're taking, in a sense, because they're being paid to do that.
Right.
A caregiver is one who does it because it's what they want to do. There is nothing, explicit in return for that care that they're providing. And it's basically, and it's probably most families right now who are, providing, that kind of service, who are, caregivers.
There you go. That makes so much sense, Robert. I'm so glad I asked, because people can have lawn caretakers, right? Mm-hmm. You can caretake a garden or a lawn or something. Yes. So the idea of wanting to give and without expecting anything explicit in return, that's really something. And I wanted to go back to the idea of the bulletproof armor and having to have a thick skin. Can you say more about that?
Yes, one of the things that I've that a lot of the people have told me, and just from the caregiving experiences that I've had personally, is that many times the care receiver will lash out or will attack, verbally and sometimes physically. But I mean, they're not real happy with their situation, understandably, and they're angry, not necessarily at you, but at the situation, at life, at God. But they will lash out, and if you're a caregiver, you're in close proximity. So a lot of times you may be the brunt, you bear the brunt of that lashing, and it's important to have that bulletproof vest, recognizing that whatever attack may be sent your way. First of all, it's most likely just not personal. It's some difficulty the receiver is going through, and to recognize that it's important not to internalize that and allow it to wound you, as the whatever it is that is thrown your way.
And I think that is the hugest challenge. Robert Sharpe, editor of The Heart and Soul of Caring. Robert has put together, interviewed 11 people, has 11 stories of how people feel about the role of caregiver, and how can you provide care and really stand up for yourself, take care of yourself at the same time. And as Tom wrote in his treatise, You Are the Hero, how can you be that soldier who knows he needs recruits and who doesn't think that he or she is supposed to do it alone? How do you develop such a network? And how do you, again, not take it personally when you are the brunt of someone's unhappiness, and somehow that unhappiness comes to be an attack on you? And there's a great expression that I really enjoy. It's called Q-tip. Quit taking it personally. And I think it's, again, easier said than done. Well, that person is talking to me. Yes, they are talking to you, but they're talking to you because of their hurt, and they're projecting so much onto you, and it's really not about you. It's about them. So would you say that that's a very, very challenging thing, is to not internalize and not to be wounded by how a care receiver sometimes treats a caregiver?
Yeah, it is. It is it's very challenging, especially if it's a loved one, a parent or a grandparent, who, you have you have this real strong, loving bond, and it seems that it's and you, in many cases, a caregiver's life is upended. When the situation happens, and many people put their dreams on hold to be a caregiver. A lot of times they make sacrifices of family, friends, or dreams, to be able to provide the care, and then to be attacked can be very hurtful if you internalize it. But like you say, recognizing that it's the care receiver's unhappiness being projected, onto the caregiver, then if you keep that in mind, you just kind of, let things just pass. That you recognize it's just not important. You just have to be secure in what you're doing, and that you're doing your best, and regardless of what the care receiver may verbalize otherwise.
Well, that's very important, that you're doing your best according to your own values, and this way it is not necessary to hear someone telling you you're doing a good job if you know that according to your own values you're doing the best job you can by your loved one, and of course getting in as many resources as possible. So on that note, Robert Sharpe, we do have to close. And how can we get your book, The Heart and Soul of Caring by Robert Sharpe?
It's available at Amazon.com, and then also through my website, which is biteradio.me. And BITE is an acronym for Bringing Inspiration to Earth. So biteradio.me.
Yes, that's right. biteradio.me.
Correct.
Bringing inspiration to the earth. Beautiful. Thank you, Robert Sharpe. Thank you, all the caregivers out there and the care receivers and everyone who cares about relationships. And this is Dr. Duffy Spencer saying goodbye for now and wishing you great relationships.